Before we get started, I have a quick favor. I've been self-funding the Finding Genius podcast for 5 years now. I've done over 3,000 episodes. And as you can see on YouTube, we're up over 1 million views on the channel, which is fantastic. The next thing I really want to push on is to get up to 10,000 subscribers. Because once we do, we'll be able to put a donate button and we'll be able to solicit donations to help keep the podcast running and to also get the Finding Genius Foundation moving along. We have a big project studying anxiety, depression, and PTSD and working on a product to help people overcome these problems because I've seen them explode recently after the last 2 years of the whole virus situation. So if you would, please subscribe to the podcast. That would help us tremendously. Give us a thumbs up and check in the description for Buy Me a Coffee. It's about $5. If you could buy me a coffee, I'd really appreciate it. It would help keep the channel going, and I love coffee. Thank you.
Forget frequently asked questions.
Common sense, common knowledge, or Google.
How about advice from a real genius? 95% of people in any profession are good enough to be qualified and licensed. 5%
go above and beyond.
They become very good at what they do, but only
0.1%
are real geniuses. Richard Jacobs has made it his life's mission to find them for you. He hunts down and interviews geniuses in every field: sleep science, cancer, stem cells, ketogenic diets, and more. Here come the geniuses. This is the Finding Genius Podcast
with Richard Jacobs.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Finding Genius podcast. My guest is Brian Peskin. He's a professor, leading scientist, globally recognized as an expert on essential fatty acids called EFAs. He has advanced the work of Nobel Prize winner Otto Warburg in the area of cellular oxygenation, and Warburg was famous for the Warburg effect in regards to cancer. So we're going to talk about what the impact is of adulterated fats on the human body through diet. So welcome, Brian.
Delighted to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, let's start with a little bit about your background. How did you come across, fatty acids and then choose to, work in the area and your research focus on it?
Very good question. Well, I'm a degreed electrical engineer from MIT, so I understand science and systems very well. And my wife became diabetic in her 30s, and the physicians actually made her worse. She went to California for a diabetes expert, gets the blood lipid panel mailed to her, and it's worse than when she went. I said, now I know why they don't give you the results when you're there. People are all asked for their money back. He has since closed his clinic, and she became diabetic at 30. And it was, look, if a top supposedly great MD doesn't know how to help me, can you find out what's going on? And my charter was to solve type 1 diabetes, which I could not do, but nobody else in the world could do it. But I've been able to mitigate the diabetic retinopathy and the neuropathy very, very well for her, and just delighted. So one thing led to another, and I got into a whole new field from being an optimization specialist, and then I put it into lipids. I was doing reading, and I came across Warburg, and everything is in the cell membrane. And luckily, the MD Anderson is around the corner from me, and they were very kind to let me spend years there without being part of the hospital or the faculty. And just one thing led to another, and it was like, someone's got to start publishing this, because what the average person, they're not getting science. The science was on the left, and the popular nutrition answers were on the right, and the failures are just horrible. So the first thing I'd like to tell everybody listening is fish oil was a wonderful first cut at EFA science, but we've advanced the scientific understanding greatly the past 30 years. And my favorite quote is, we are suffering from a wealth of information, but a poverty of understanding what that information really means. And for example, inflammation is now known as the root cause of the majority of diseases. A lot of physicians don't even know that. And these include cancer. We'll talk about that because I know that's close to you. And I have MD Anderson right here. A lot of people don't know Warburg. Cardiovascular disease, diabetes, COPD. These are no longer diseases of just old age. People in their 20s, 30s, 40s are getting them. And Alzheimer's and frontal lobe dementia are all over the news today, but they have no real solution. Everybody listening is going to get a really precise solution.
If you look at how traditional allopathic medicine and doctors are trained, they get like 5 seconds of nutrition, maybe one day. And, I've spoken to many, many, many of them. And, nutrition really doesn't have much provable bearing on your health. And, they're still in that crazy paradigm, like a drug is going to fix you, when a lot of it, unfortunately and fortunately, is within your control. Sleep, nutrition, your mental life, all that stuff. Especially nutrition's huge. If you live to be 80 years old, the only thing keeping you alive is what you eat and drink and breathe. But somehow that doesn't reflect on your health. It's like, come on,
Couldn't agree with you more. I mean, only recently do they acknowledge that EFAs, we'll be talking a lot about them, pass the blood-brain barrier into the brain. I have no idea how they thought they got there, because the body can't make them unless they pass the blood-brain barrier. And what I also tell people is never forget the Nobel Prize was awarded to a physician that invented the lobotomy. Of course, that's banned everywhere because of how bad it is. But the medical profession jumped, just like they're done with fish oil, and put everybody in the wrong place. So I tell people, never forget that. But here's where you got to start. Theoretical physiology. And most doctors do not get an undergraduate degree in this. I've talked to teachers, lecturers, professors. They said it's basically too hard. The doctors don't want a degree in it. But we have 100 trillion cells. Every cell has its own membrane. And the membrane, actually the brain of the cell, should be spelled membrain. Each membrane is half lipid and half protein. Of the lipid portion, most tissues and organs are a quarter to a third what are called parent DFAs. That's omega-6 and omega-3 that are essential, that must come from food. Your body can't make them. And by the way, when you calculate the average tissue and organ percentage ratio of omega-6 to omega-3, it is 12 to 1 in favor of parent omega-6. So we need lots of parent omega-6, and this information comes from Biology of the Cell, Harper's Illustrated Biochemistry, and Textbook of Medical Physiology. So I live in the medical textbooks. I look at studies because they should confirm the medical science. But you have a lot of physicians only looking at studies, and the studies can be opposite to the science because they use 95% confidence intervals, which means 5% of all studies actually fail, but they appear to be correct. So big problems in how they're doing it. The second thing everybody needs to know, memorize this. The brain uses just 2 to 5 milligrams of DHA a day. 2 to 5. This translates to 100 to 300 times, Richard, overdose for each 1,000 milligram of fish oil or krill oil.
What do you mean overdose?
Professionals are recommending 4 capsules a day. And this comes...
Oh, well, what's the efficiency of uptake of it, though? For every milligram I take orally in a capsule, how much will actually get to my brain?
Is DHA. There's other oils in there. There's other lipids in there. So if I take 1,000 milligram of fish oil capsule, there's 600 milligrams of DHA, and it's all metabolically active. So you have 600, and your body at most needs 6. That's 100-fold overdose per day of 1 capsule. I've never seen anybody reference or calculate how much DHA is the brain using. And this it's published. You have to be told this. You can't figure it out on your own. There's no way. You have to be told it.
So what's the consequence of someone having a fish oil capsule every day for years?
We'll get into that in a minute. They did a study with it, and what happens is the excess DHA doesn't get burned up. It gets, number one, put into the skin. You get sun on the skin, it gets hot, skin cancer. Dermatologists don't have a clue. Sunscreen won't help you. It's the heat. Number 2, it displaces the cardiolipin's inner membrane, which is supposed to be all parent omega-6, and the DHA gets in there and it doesn't work. This was published, and they actually stated it gives you congestive heart failure. And when you put the parent omega-6 back in, it rescues it. So it's a real problem. But they looked at positron emission testing with radioactive tracers into the brain. They could tell exactly what goes in. I know you're thinking, okay, Brian, so you got the brain, it's using 2 to 6, but the eye is loaded with DHA too. Yeah, but it's real small. So double it. So say you need 12 milligrams a day. You're still getting 600. That's 50 times overload at the least. And if you're taking more than 1,000 milligrams a day, now to put that in perspective, take 100 aspirin, call me in the morning. Don't, of course, I'm being facetious. You will be dead. You will bleed to death. So don't anybody do that. But this is what we're getting from so-called health professionals that don't know what they're talking about. things have advanced so far. They used to think we needed a ton of DHA, which is a derivative from the parent. So it comes from the parent omega-3. But this is how bad things are. And if people don't learn this on their own, they're getting really, really harmed. So everybody makes DHA, which is a derivative from the parent, ALA, alpha-linolenic acid is what it's called. That's 3 double bonds, doesn't matter much, except your body can't make it. Must come from food, but your body can make all the DHA it needs. And then the next 21st century insight is less than 1% of the parents are converted to derivatives. It's about 0.1%. So 1 part in 1,000 of the parents, parent omega-6, the parent omega-3, are converted derivatives. 30 years ago, they thought it was 40%. So the first cut was, hey, we'll be gentle on the body, give it all these derivatives so it doesn't have to work, except you're not supposed to get many. And when you get an overload, it doesn't get just oxidized or burned up. It gets pushed in the tissue that's not supposed to have it. This is why skin cancer is so rampant with no end in sight. And this comes out of the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, PUFA newsletter, Journal of Lipids, and your typical physician does not read those journals. This is hard science. They read JAMA, New England Journal of Medicine, Lancet. They read clinical journals that are typically drug trials. What's the big problem? Third one, key finding 2017, the majority of cells are hypersensitive to changes in their membrane lipids induced by the diet. So this answers your question, what happens with that overdose? Inflammation is now known as key, and the article says this is a game changer. And I'll give you the answer. Why is it inflammatory? Simple. Processed omega-6 in all the cooking oils that people use from the supermarket, unless they're organic, omega-3 oils are never used or to react. They have 3 double bonds. You never fry or cook in flax oil, for example, but use sunflower, safflower. You can use the omega-9 cooking oils like olive oil, like avocado oil. And this was groundbreaking when I saw it in 2017. Nobody else picked it up to my knowledge that I've ever seen reported. And it's called activation of the unfolded protein response by lipid bilayer stress. So your cell is sensing these oils are screwed up, and they're screwed up so they don't go bad. You can't walk by the fish oil section and smell fish going, like fish that's spoiled. It used to be horrible. Now they spray it, they use peroxide, they do all kinds of things. But DHA, and most people don't know this, goes rancid at room temperature. Okay, 70 degrees. Automatically, Richard. We're at 98.6. So you put this in, all this fish oil is going rancid. What do you think's happening? All the antioxidants are rushing from the brain going, what did Richard do? I got to run away from the brain, take care of it in the bloodstream. Now you're having oxidation in the brain. Gee, do we have an Alzheimer's problem? Do we have a dementia problem? Do we have a frontal lobe problem and brain fog? Yes. This is it in a nutshell. And this came from Molecular Cell. 27.
So we think we're helping ourselves, but if we have too much of certain supplements, you're saying it's backfire.
Before we continue, I've been personally funding the Finding Genius podcast for 4.5 years now, which has led to 2,700 plus interviews of clinicians, researchers, scientists, CEOs, and other amazing people who are working to advance science and improve our lives and our world. Even though this podcast gets 100,000 plus downloads a month, we need your help to reach hundreds of thousands more worldwide. Please visit findinggeniuspodcast.com and click on Support Us. We have 3 levels of membership from $10 to $49 a month, including perks such as the ability to see ahead in our interview calendar and ask questions of upcoming guests, transcripts of podcasts you're interested in, the ability to request specific topics or guests, and more. Visit findinggeniuspodcast.com and click Support Us today. Now back to the show.
Totally. We are our worst enemy, and I'm an engineer again by training, so my first thing is, how much does the brain use? How much do we need? I've never seen anybody provide a calculation. Where did this recommendation come from? It's appalling to me. It's absolutely appalling to me. So the processed omega-6 cooking oils are the problem. And this is the reason why all these diseases, Richard, are occurring in younger and younger people, 20s, 30s, getting heart attacks, cancer, frontal lobe dementia, brain fog, young people. This never used to happen.
Is it primarily the supplementation or is it the diet that?
No, it's the adulterated cooking oil, period.
Okay.
Is the cause, and then all the problems are in the oils for supplementation. You can take all the proteins you want, you can take the carbs you want, they're going to give you diabetes, you overdose on carbs, and they're going to make you overweight because of the insulin response. But all the hazard in the inflammation issue, because remember, the cell membrane's half protein, half lipid, is all in the lipids. That's where the adulteration happens, and the adulterated oils are not going bad in the body. There was a guy on the internet saying cardiolipin in the inner layer of the mitochondria, which is your cellular energy producers, was all omega-3. And absolutely incorrect. Absolutely wrong. It's supposed to be omega-6, but if you take the fish oil, the doses they're recommending, it displaces it, and that's why it's said you stop it, you put the omega-6 back in, and it rescues it. And all the problem is the processed oils, you have to get organic cooking oils, or you will have cancer, heart disease, Alzheimer's in your future, and just like everybody's happening, which is very, very unfortunate. And this was Dr. Spyteller, one of Germany's top biochemists, and I talked to him and he published this. Oxidized cholesterol is what they call it. It's not oxidizing in your body. We're eating it already happening from the cooking oils. And people are not being told this, and fish oil is not the solution at all. And I calculated, I'll leave you with one thing in this area, just 1% of the processed omega-6 cooking oils over of a tablespoon a day. Everybody's getting at least a tablespoon of these oils a day from eating. They're in everything. Overloads each of those 100 trillion cells in your body, Richard, by a factor of 100,000 to 1. Now, the analogy here is I'm a good martial artist. I have 100,000 people running at me. They don't need to know any martial arts. I'm dead. That's what's happening to every cell in your body right now, and everybody is suffering from chronic inflammation. That's an autoimmune disease, and your body is sensing it. It's due to thermodynamics. It's very technical, but you don't need to know it. All you need to know is if you take processed cooking oils, you will be inflamed all the time. And even cancer is an inflammatory disease. Weinberg, who coined the oncogene, he went to MIT, he's an MIT guy. 2010 reversed it, said there's not enough mutations to have genetics as the cause of cancer. Inflammation takes center stage was his quote. No one I know saw that. He had a whole book called One Renegade Cell, and I spent 5 years devoted strictly to cancer. I actually wrote a book called The Hidden Story of Cancer, sold 40,000 copies around the world. So it's a very, very tragic situation we're in with people living 30 years ago when we didn't have the kind of science we have now. There's brilliant high-resolution chromatography, positron emission testing, that's a PET scan, so we can tell everything that's going on, but then the conclusions and what to do are so wrong most of the time. I am the biggest anti-fish oil guy on the internet, and people hate me because I'm taking a lot of money out of their pockets. And then people that hear my work or read it go to the physician and go, what about this Peskin guy? And what I tell people is, if you don't get scientific medical journals, Harper's Illustrated Biochemistry, Molecular Biology of the Cell, Textbook of Medical Physiology, and somebody's just giving you your opinion, run. Opinions are great for art and politics, not medical science. This is your life, and it's horrible. And we can talk about art in a minute, and I'll give you an example.
What should someone do then if some cooking oil is unavoidable? What should the threshold so low? Again, how does someone counteract it?
It oxidizes spontaneously, so that's giving you the problem the minute you eat it. You need to get organic cooking oils, so organic olive oil, organic avocado oil. Cold press by itself is insufficient. You don't want the chemicals in it. You don't want the processing. They use catalysts. They hydrogenate it. They have esterified fats. There's a lot of ways, even without just a trans fat like New York got rid of. The minute that came out a decade ago, I told people, watch what they replaced the dreaded, harmful, cancer-causing trans fat with. I guarantee it's going to be worse. and it is worse. It's called an interesterified fat. You want to hear what fish oil does to give you heart disease?
Okay.
Well, the first thing is you take the parent omega-3, and that lowers heart disease. This comes out of Circulation, one of the top heart disease journals in America. And the parent omega-6 is the body's natural statin. There's something called PGI2, which is prostacyclin. It's a natural blood thinner that Professor Vane won the Nobel Prize in Medicine for. Nobody mentions that. There's PGE1, which is the body's #1 anti-inflammatory. And this is the world I live in to compensate for this, because there's 9 diseases and disorders that's called the delta-6 desaturase metabolic pathway, where this pathway is impaired in those diseases: cancer, heart disease, diabetes, COPD, any inflammatory disease. And that pathway leads directly to prostaglandin series 1, the #1 anti-inflammatory, and that's the cause of all the diseases, and it's much stronger than anything with omega-3. We're getting highly misled. They thought omega-3 was a cat's meow 30 years ago, but the medical field typically stays 20 years behind, Richard. That's why I spend the bulk of my time during the day, every day, are in medical journals, and this was in Smart Fats talking about it. But here's how bad it is. An amazing American Heart Association quote that's been forgotten in 2009, and I'll quote it: omega-6 has powerful anti-inflammatory properties that counteract any pro-inflammatory activity. Because on the internet, everybody just parrots. Omega-6 is bad, omega-6 is bad, omega-6 is bad. I just told you, you need 12 times more omega-6 than omega-3 in your cells and tissues. And this is in the medical journals. It's incorrect to view omega-6 fatty acids are pro-inflammatory. And here's the last sentence, and this is all quote. It's scathing. That reflects a rather naive understanding of biochemistry. They quoted this. They said this. Where does it come from? Journal of the American Heart Association, 2009, published in Circulation, again, one of America's top heart journals. So it's there. People are not getting this. They want to sell them products and make money, and I'm not against making money with products if it helps you, but certainly not if it harms you. Here's another one, 1986, going back, 35 years. Fish oil causes blood clotting in patients with existing heart disease. That's atherosclerosis. Fish oil makes existing heart disease worse. In patients with existing heart problems, atherosclerosis, biggest cause of having a heart attack, our natural blood thinner biosynthesis, meaning the PGI2, was 42% less during the fish oil period. It knocked the production down by 42% less. This was in New England Journal of Medicine. That's America's top medical journal, and I've never seen it quoted since. What you see with the fish oil people is just study after study, and now they're all coming back saying it doesn't work. Even Cochrane Reviews said fish oil is worthless for helping your heart. But once doctors get on board with something, Richard, they don't change. It's like a light switch. The minute it's turned on, they don't shut it off. So they keep parroting the wrong stuff. And then everybody parrots one guy. People mistakenly think, hey, this doctor's doing his own research. None of them are doing their own research. It's just copied and pasted. It's horrible. It's not the loss of the parent omega-6. This is what happens when you take too much fish oil, which is anything pretty much. Marine grill fish oil ruins the mitochondria. And the mitochondria are the cellular engines. I told you your body has 100 trillion cells. Well, a cell can have 100 mitochondria. So there's way more mitochondria than cells. The inner layer is supposed to be all parent omega-6. The problem wasn't the loss of the parent omega-6, meaning the deficiency. It was the replacement of the omega-6 with the DHA that promoted the reduction in activities. Frontiers of Cardiovascular Medicine, Journal of Biological Chemistry. See, again, the doctors aren't reading any of these. Researchers like me are, but you're not getting the research into the clinicians. So if somebody doesn't read my work or hear me, they're doomed.
Let's say, I do want to improve, so I get home cooking oils, the right ones, the organic ones, and I use them. But I don't eat all my meals at home. I'm pretty good.
Nobody
Let's
does.
say I do. Well, let's say I do 80%. Is the crap oil that I get, the non-organic stuff from eating out periodically, enough to completely offset the good stuff I'm putting in, or what would that look like?
Excellent question. It goes as a percentage. So if I'm eating 80% adulterated omega-6 oils and I have 20% good, every cell membrane only has 20% good. Now, what's key is how much bad can I have? Arno Warburg showed if you have 35% decrease in cellular oxygenation, not bloodstream, cellular, very different. So your pulse oximeter, you put your finger in, the doctor does in the office, is worthless for measuring this. If it's 35% less, cancer will be induced. You don't feel it, you don't see it, you don't know it. And it can take 8 to 10 years before you get the cancer. And this is published. It's all Otto Warburg's work, the greatest MD, PhD, medical physicist of the 20th century, the greatest physiologist of the 20th century, hands down. And people have forgotten his work. See, medicine doesn't build on the past like engineering does. Engineering, you watch Discovery. And this technological event, the brilliance of it today was built on the shoulders of this engineer from 50 years ago. And his was built on the last guy that was a genius 100 years ago. You don't get that in medicine. All you get is, hey, I'm brilliant. Here's what you do. It's unbelievable from my perspective, but it answers precisely why we're getting misinformation that's rampant, and rampant it is. If you're diabetic, you should be petrified because taking fish oil blunts the insulin response and elevates the blood sugar levels. This was done in 1988, 89.
Well, what if you take a tiny amount of fish oil?
Nobody's taking a tiny amount. That's the problem.
No, but what if you do take a tiny amount? You get the weakest one you can, and you have it once a week or something.
You don't need it.
Good.
Yeah, you can have a fish oil capsule a week if it's 500 milligrams. You don't need it. Your body makes it. What you need, the parent omega-6 that's unadulterated, unprocessed, and organic. And actually, I specialize in formulations. There's one that I specialize. See, you asked me, I'll give you this now. It's called Easy Trek, EasyTrek. And it is specifically meant to nutritionally compensate for inflammation, diseases, and disorders. It's a medical food, and it compensates for an impairment in that delta-6 desaturase pathway so you can get enough of the PGE1. Your body will make it. It's not giving PGE1 to you because it's got a very short half-life. It only lasts less than an hour. You want your body making it, and this is the perfect answer. People can go to goodforhealth.org and check that out, but this is made for people with diseases and disorders that have inflammatory diseases, and you can ask your doctor about it. It is phenomenal. There's nothing in the world like it, and the doctors that put their patients on this are just getting incredible.
I'm guessing you've done this for yourself. What did you feel like when you did it? What was involved?
Well, if you have a disease or disorder, which I don't have, I got huge inflammation because a car ran over my foot, broke the ankle, broke 3 bones. So it's been about 1.5 years, and the healing is beyond belief with Easy Trek. The doctors just can't believe how the healing is. And you can check this out with CT scans. And then we have patients that have all kinds of diseases and disorders. The physicians let me know how well it's working. COPD, people can't breathe within 30 days, numerous off oxygen, cutting back on their steroids. The inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein go way, way down. Diabetic neuropathy goes down. The amount of insulin you need goes down. It just goes on and on with any kind of inflammatory disease. Cancer, the tumors stop growing. I mean, this sort of thing. And it's a medical food. So I can talk disease prevention. It's way above a nutritional supplement. Legally, with a nutritional supplement, you cannot talk about disease prevention. But a medical food is way beyond it. And you have to have a huge amount of science supporting a pathway that it does. And of course, it has to be a food. And these oils are a food. And Easy Trek is 100% food from a very specific ratio and combination of these oils. And to answer your question, there's the perfect amount of algal oil, which is a marine oil with DHA in there. But people don't know the ratios, and it took a lot of science, and there's a patent on this. It's very, very strong. There's nothing in the world like it. So excellent question. And easy, also a cellular oxygenator. So it addresses Warburg's prime cause, the cellular oxygenation. And that's a problem because inflammation drains all of your oxygen. If you ask any physician, what's the best way to combat inflammation? Oxygen. That's why they give you ozone treatments. Anything to increase the oxygenation, they do, but the EFAs at the cell level with fully functional parent omega-6 and then some of the derivatives to maximize the PGE1 to knock down that inflammation are just incredible. So we address the inflammation and maximize the tissue terrain. That's why my foot healed, the ankle healed so well. People look at the before and after. It's incredible. And when I was in the ambulance to the hospital, my blood pressure never got above 140/90. The ambulance techs could not believe it because typically you just go into shock. I mean, I looked at my ankle. It was 5 times bigger than normal. It was unbelievable. And it shrunk down by about 2/3. Still a little big. There is some scar tissue, but it's getting better and better by the month. And this is even a year and a half out. My mom fell, broke her hip, and the recovery was in just a few months. It's unbelievable how you recover from any injury. We have martial artists doing this, pro athletes, because they get so much inflammation from being hit and knocked around.
Well, wait. So if you have the supplement, that's great. I can see why it helps you. But if you continue to have significant amounts of vegetable oils, let's say, or crappy oils,
stop it.
How much would it help if you did that versus stopping it and having the supplement?
It's going to help, but if you have any disease or disorder, the regular oils will not help the impaired delta-6 desaturase pathway where you get more of the PGE1. So that's why I developed this, because so many people have diseases and disorders today. We're seeing people, and the doctors are seeing them, heart attacks in their 20s, cancer in their 30s, frontal lobe dementia in their 40s. This never, ever, ever used to happen, and just having an organic oil won't solve it. Once you're on the path to having a problem, you really need the right medical food, and that's why I developed Easy Track.
Okay.
But
all right.
Everybody listening, number one, needs to get organic cooking oils. And any food that has fat, Richard, bacon, egg, butter, cheese, cream, all the residues, all the pesticides, all the hormones go into the fat. That's where you want to spend your money on organic, natural. So organic, egg, bacon, butter, cheese, cream, pasture-raised is the best. But as long as it's organic, it won't be bad for you. So everybody can make an enormous step in that direction.
Okay. Well, excellent. Well, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. Where can people go to get the Easy Trek, and where can they go to find out more about you?
Sure. They can go to goodforhealth.org. Good for Health. Make sure it's .org, and it's all there. And I think at checkout, if they put in Genius 1, they'll get 10% off forever, I was just told. And at first order, shipping is free. That's about, they can read all about it on the site and see what it does. And so many people have chronic inflammation today because, again, if you eat out a lot fast food or even at a fine dining restaurant, they're using the processed oils. So everybody has chronic inflammation. I get doctors all the time, Brian, isn't everybody inflamed? I said, yeah. So everybody actually needs to be using the medical food Easy Trek, but they can check it out and drop an email if they have any questions about it. But we're delighted, and I thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
If you like this podcast, please click the link in the description to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
You've been listening to the Finding Genius podcast with Richard Jacobs. If you like what you hear, be sure to review and subscribe to the Finding Genius podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And want to be smarter than everybody else? Become a premium member at findinggeniuspodcast.com. This podcast is for information only. No advice of any kind is being given. Any action you take or don't take as a result of listening is your sole responsibility. Consult professionals when advice is needed.